Digital virtuosity. This is going to be about anomalies in the sky. I had to share some of this stuff because I personally came across a lot of photos that I had that have proof for myself that there is more than one sun. I looked through all my photos from around the world in my travels, and I've noticed in a lot of the backgrounds that there's definitely some anomalies. So I want to share some stuff about sky masking. I think if you go back into ancient history, there's clues to 0 point coming from the flat Earth center, from the North Pole being the South Pole, if you look at it at a bullseye view. One ring to rule them all. And there's many maps from Atlantis that describe Java Seas, and Plutonian maps that describes the world's summit as Mount Meru as the center point. So if you look at it at a spiritual perspective too, in Revelations it says there will be no more sun. So we have to think, why would they be masking the skies? Why would they be masking other celestial bodies coming in from other districts if there's more land that they're hiding? And why would they be doing that? And I think we're coming to a point in our digital DVR virtuosity time period, as this hour is very late, that Lucifer is trying to transpose himself as the sun almost, and promoting things like the dawn of the gods, Pleiadian things, bringers of the dawn, etc., etc. That's getting into a one world religion, since the New World Order will be run by religious people. So in my opinion, I believe that the earth is a concave earth, and that's reflective in our eyes. And it's in our human anatomy. And God hid his code inside of us and in our nature. He says, let thine eye be single with the glory of God. So what's happened, I believe, since the fall is we live in an upside down world. If you put on glasses, try to see flipped upside down, your mind eventually will perceive it as normal. So what we're perceiving as our reality is definitely skewed. Technology is advancing, but our spirituality isn't advancing with it. And that's the problem. It's not equalizing with the hourglass shape in our advancement. And so there's things that are out of balance, and our perception of what's going on in multiple reality streams is getting diminished. It's getting overshadowed. There's overlord powers that are putting it under a bushel that wish to snuff our light out and replace it with their own, because they know that we have the ability to end them in this existence. And because of that, they fear our power, and because they once knew and saw the power of God in the heavens. So believing isn't enough, because demons believe and tremble and shake because they know in the power of God. So when you say you believe in God, that's really not enough. You actually have to form a relationship and receive his grace and come under his authority. The reality really is that God has always been the lamp on our feet, and that's the real illumination for our minds. And when we put on the mind of Christ, it shows us the way out of this world and Saturn's maze and how to overcome the bull. And it brings us out of field vision and out of our closed circuit box headsets, VR systems, and into permanent perpetuating congruence with the mind of Christ instead. So I know that their matrix is falling apart, along with an incessant need to mask the skies, extra suns and moons, and other celestial bodies and apertures in space and time that we just can't wrap our minds around yet. So there's more to this world than what we've been shown in areas where the Nephilim descended onto and they laid foundations at, and they eventually worked their way into this centralized reality zone from the outside in. So we know about Lumia and Mu. Those are also Illuminati copycats, and they turned those places upside down, those cradles of civilization. Their plans eventually did swallow them, though, and they became prisoners under the cast iron dome itself. At the center of this earth is magnetic Meru. That's the mountain that Satan brought Yeshua up to and showed him all the kingdoms. And by all the kingdoms, it means the kingdom of air, water, earth, fire, all the way down to the bottom of the sea. I call him and his followers the locust eaters, part of wormwood, the opening and breakthrough of the firmament, seen in heaven, and the burrowing of its way like a worm in wood into our bodies. We're made out of clay and natural elements, so I find it interesting why they call wormwood wormwood. Morgellons, I believe, has a direct correlation to wormwood because that is insect DNA that is patented and part of our bio API. And it's part of the AI that comes and eats through bites into our reality through virtual reality. And it's like a virus. And even computer systems use viruses that are like centipedes, and they call them worms because it takes a fraction here and there, and they can siphon money from entire systems eventually. I believe there's implants lodged around the head and the neck areas. Those go around the liver and the gallbladder channel. And that's TC elements of wood. And as a child, I kind of would see the moon as a false light, kind of like a flashlight. I knew there was something going on with it that was very wrong with it. I would actually see 3 faces in it. It would change a lot in front of me. I saw a white rabbit in it a lot. That has to do with Alice and CERN and actual entities waving at me. I believe the moon has some type of radar that can dissolve our body if you get too close to it, and that there are prison cubes on the dark side of it. And these would also fall into the soul catcher technology realm. The SIS to me shows me that the physical proof they're showing us is one of the reasons why they put it up there, so that the world will believe that we have a command post and that we're surrounded by satellites on a globe, but that's really not the case. That is a fiction. The ISS is owned by unnamed private interest groups, and no one will ever see them. These are like the bird people you see in a lot of movies. The hidden hand, the ISS as MITT technology, and it's a hub operating through a way station port. And I believe it's constantly scanning and searching and relaying its in its system information streams, even about our souls, our soul natures born into this matrix, and our imprints, and how they've cataloged everything. Because basically they can broadcast anything, even emotion or DNA, into the airwaves, which Hasatan is the ruler of the principality of air. So our EM fields are also mapped out by the X phone and our fingerprints. And I believe that this universe is a binary system. Since the fall and we're in a dual state, it would kind of make sense that the universe is in a binary system, state of mind. And that creates a chasm and a duality in the brain, because it's like we're in a synthetic overlay system since we ingested whatever black fruit, whether it was black goo from an animal fruit or whatever it was from the serpent in the garden, which got into our system and hijacked it and hacked into us like a draconian LSD trip. So it attached itself at our brainstem, I think, and it disrupted the blueprint for the human natural evolution. And our brainstem expresses this duality in our systems, and we're constantly emulating and emitting dual frequencies on a daily basis. Since our DNA composes reality, we are within the melting pot. Actually, what I want to say, that was wrong. With the ancient wall sheets that are melting, our memories and our veils are also thinning with that. And water is memory, and that's been scientifically proven. That's the point I'm trying to get across. So we're coming back to this point of the apocalypse, kind of like that movie Pink Floyd, Tear Down the Wall. Water's memory. We're 70% water. Earth is so much water. And actually, if you take 140-degree frequencies and bounce it off at a certain angles of water, it creates different reflections of a perceived reality. And we know that we're tied into the earth through our hearts, the biggest stargates, the Schumann resonance, the heart chambers. And those chambers in our hearts contain more neuropeptides than the brain, making it the higher mind. We have a resonance factor and circadian rhythms, so we feel what's going on at some subtle level, some ripple in time. Now, the book of Enoch says that the ocean, the sea, at one point we will see it clearly, and it will open up its dead, Sheol, and the roots of the trees of the Garden of Eden are down there, the 2 sides that souls go on to when they pass the earthly bodies. So what tree we water ensures and secures our place in the afterlife. It's called the glassy sea. It states that the saints will walk across the sea when hell freezes over. So there's sinister reasons why they're poisoning our water and food especially, and trying to change that temple of God. And I believe that we've traced the edge of our atmosphere. And those old maps they probably burned, and scrolls they burned through the Crusades, and that told of the clarity of all these land masses. And when they're disrupting our natural frequencies and ability to transmit and transceive, then we can't function enough to carry out our missions to the end. And that's what they want to stop, essentially. So I believe the ancients had the most clarity about these land masses. The rest of the matter, the districts, Indonesia being one gate to the system, kind of like lines of demarcation. There's a lot of layout patterns left by our predecessors that merge with our central zone, and the oceans are getting angrier, and the angels guard, the quadrants of this world, and everything is shifting. And they're stealing all the sand from the bottom of the ocean, which is causing a lot of environmental problems and tides rising, not because of global warming. And the truth movement is so discombobulated things and the circles of nonsense that go on trying to impress others, that the shift and the new age counterfeit is pretty abundant. So this flat earth model that I'm trying to get across, what was shown to me in my mind was kind of like an astrolabe, which is a tool of the angels. And it looked like that type of model. When you flattened it out, then you see our domed earth. That's what it was revealing to me. And supposedly there's 33 land districts, 13 districts, 9 oceans, 4 rivers that float out of Mesopotamia, like squares of a mandala, 1 + 5, like a star. And I have seen for myself this masking technology that's like shapeshifters. You've got the belts that people wear, the sun simulators. They can turn up fake brightness from one point of the sky to the other. Like the central sun, I think, is more like a seed bank. And they're trying to blind the real sun, the important central sun's presence, so we can't feel it, and absorb the photonic streams. They want us to absorb convoluted rays like we absorb dirty electricity that hooks into our EM fields and causes miasms and distortions. Our EMF brainstem in studies it turned out that in remote viewing, the key to telepathy was biophotons. So they don't want us receiving and transmitting photonic lights of higher dimensions because they know and understand the heavenly schematics before God casts them out. So what we're absorbing now is shortwave frequencies, so they can remote control us through nanites and projective thought games and inferences that disrupt us, because they know that through studying us, we have the means hardwired into us through Jehovah's codes to overthrow the beast system overlay projectors, to not just cause a wrench and to be thrown in the works. So they feed us screen displays, and they're more like smoke screens that just tells me more that the kingdom of heaven is nigh. And if you're listening to this, you're probably one of the watchmen. And they cover up things coming in from other districts, because then when we see them like strange creatures washing up on the shores, we comprehend it to be some kind of parallel reality, some mystery that we try to explain it rationally. When really I think it's because they've been hiding these other land masses all along. And I don't really believe in the fragmentation of parallel realities anymore so much, because the CIA even used a number 1728 selves to lock and unlock the mind, like combination locks. I believe we have one true self that's multidimensional. It's known by God, the complexities within our spirit being and soul matrix. And our personality selves, God can co-join with him in wholeness, because he says he will make us whole. And that's promise, not a pride symbol like the rainbow. It's a promise between the double rainbow and the way out. So the deeper archetypal parts of our psyche are really just things coming up from the demiurge, creations that existed, remnants still remain in lakes and waters that are buried under land masses, and they use super soldiers to recover and retrieve some of these artifacts. Even the Great Lakes one day will reveal too what is underneath them. America was destined to become Atlantis. And I believe there's a pyramidal type structure underneath it that will one day split the nation in 3. And when it shifts, people will need to go to safe zones so that they won't be flooded, since the Edgar Cayce map is only partially right. And there's so much monitoring going on, and the awake ones know the truth. The people that were in the secret space programs, their memories are just cover memories. They were those who were stationed in these other districts as clones, some of them being scientist clones. They had relationships with other beings of these districts and other places in time and space. So these are just places where the elite have hoarded their prime resources and done all their trillions of dollars secret work. Like I said, the space program was a screen memory. It's harder to logically explain it to yourself. And it kind of sets a stage for character assassination, since they're showing other districts in movies now that people can more easily brush it off as a work of fiction. And there's also been a lot of pictures about floating cities. And some of these are holographic and some aren't, I think. They're showing a lot of the cube in movies, the cube being the building block of life. They're showing a lot of DNA stuff, how they're trying to hack into the Temple of God, making buildings look like DNA strands. There's one in Dubai on Palm Island that's a skyscraper that's like a rotating DNA spiral even. So the super soldiers that were involved in these other districts and the work that went on there were in a program called Kaleidoscope Eyes. And that kept the programming personalities in role, those who were involved. Unless you're completely plugged in to the pulse of the beast system and spiritually dead, you won't be able to access this truth. But you can always ask of God and he'll show you the truth in all things. People that don't have the spark in their eye reveal that if they're spiritually alive in the book of life or not. The truth is, the elite want us to stay in fragmentation instead of understanding the power and wholeness we have access to through our Creator in this life. They disconnect with organic life systems and operations in heaven, easier for them to keep us in a static life state. Psalms 104:2 says, "Cover yourself with light as with a garment, stretching out heaven as a tent." I've heard jet noises many times and looked up. There's no plane. There's cloaking technology being used every day. Crafts flying overhead, objects in the sky pretending to be stars, pulsing, disappearing. 3 of them doing a circle around each other. They follow me a lot. There's lotus things in the sky I've seen that are kind of like breathing silver. These are not stars. They change shape to look like airplanes even, and then they glitch out. Blinking stars are a big common one. I've seen the sky glitch with red spots in the clouds in Atsteland, Wisconsin, where there's a small pyramid that connects to the Yucatan Peninsula ley lines. And there's a lot of mysteries in Rock Lake and a buried Mayan princess there. But the truth is, it was a place where there was tribes of cannibals that were giants, and one of the tribes that just ended up killing the other tribe off. I've only recalled about a fourth of my experiences, probably. So, uses of codes. They copycat everything. The 1111 gateway code is also copying. There were 515 witnesses at the crucifixion. Jesus is the 11. He's the real gateway code. They put 72 blocks on the pyramid, the all-seeing eye being the 73rd, trying to always be one step above God, the A-I-A-E-Y-E. There's 33 vertebrae. 33 is used a lot. There's a movie, Agent 47. That's trying to be one above 46 since there's 23 in our DNA and 23 making 46. There's 88 constellations. The H is used a lot in time travel and in a lot of Nazi symbolism. There's 11, 11, 22, 22. So these are all examples of duality consciousness. We have 11 systems. It's like a double binary gate that mirrors black cliff-oths in our tree of life. The 11th hour is abracadabra. 33 parallel. The dark cabal try to hijack like a highway roadblock. We, our royalty and our DNA could assist in improving all DNA as the souls in the other 22 systems. There's 7 blood types. God divided us by that. And you can research that through the Garden of Truth and Lies website. There's a flow of things and everything, and there is a sacred geometry. Stop signs resemble liver cells. Our DNA has a naturally forming hexagram. So they've hijacked that and perverted that into the middle being a black cube instead of the holy cube, the Holy of Holies. We experience changes in how the body synthesizes proteins and transfers energy into the mitochondria of the cell. You can research this through the citric acid cycle or the Krebs cycle, where amino acid sequencing occurs. There's also 33 used in America as the WE, the We 33 Trust, mimicking Elohim. There's also a lot of symbology of the 111, which represents the pillars, and then putting the pillar in between as the temple of man and changing the temple of man. Hasatan has polluted the blood of man, propping up his bloodlines as being powerful, when the truth is there is nothing more powerful and life-changing than the blood of Jesus Christ. So the digitized realm is a counterfeit realm of the spiritual realms. That's what God showed me. Hasatan likes to play savior. He likes to judge because he can't judge or create. He can only manipulate. He knows that we will be judging angels someday. So they use the pyramids and these knockoff tesseract systems as energy harnesses throughout the planet's grid. And that brought open doors into Egypt, rebuilding partial tesseracts of God from heavenly sciences so that Lucifer could anchor his kingdom here. The magnetic Meru represents the black sun, Belial, and Behemoth, and he showed Yeshua's kingdoms: air, earth, water, fire, the belly of Ea, the glassy sea, the 0 point. At that time, Adamic language was a prominent language on earth, known by all. And the atomic building blocks are natures intrinsically woven into all matter, atomic energy. ATOM, ADM. Even the poles itself I see as counterfeit to God's ruling with a rod of iron. God said that David was the apple of his eye, the torus shape. The bite taken out of the apple possibly changed our morphogenetic field and structure comprising this plane of existence, starting in atrophy and entrophic misnomers. And that fills and emanates off of the poles. And the vibrations and the patterns that are seen through things create owl's eyes. A lot of these occult symbols are just patterns of energy because they want to be the creator. Phi VBM Tori array. The A over B equals the Phi symbol. They want to be the ones behind the hidden powers and the forces of creation. They want to be the judges because they know their judgment is inevitable. So they turn everything around to become the preemptive force behind creation with the masks. And God says he will reveal himself to those who seek him. So you can see through all this bullshit. Psalms 18:30 says, his way is perfect, the word is tried. He's a buckler to all those that trusted him. Everything in essence and all things were created on God's word. That's what everything in creation hangs off of, is the word. Torah, the Torah. Moses interpreted every word that God said perfectly because he hid his codes in his word. Even though how bad the Bible's been trying to be changed, attacked, there's still codes in there because God put certain codes in there. Every seventh letter reveals the word Torah even. The 0 is the nucleus, the elements. 1 is sensing, radiation, 1 through 2. 2 is thinking, electromagnetism, 3 to 10. 3 is feeling, 11 through 18, thermodynamics. 4 is willing, sound, 19 through 36. 3 is the body, gravitation, 37 through 54. 2 is the soul, the fusion, 55 through 86. 1 is the spirit, the fission, 87 through 118. No more on this biofilm and bioAPI. You can research more through Dan McMullen's Solar Warden. This is a U.S. patent number BI 6245531. Morgellons, patented by Stanford University, is a myiasis of 38 species. There's the 11 again. Of flies, the Lord of the Flies, Beelzebub. The Drosophila stage, the polynucleotide ecdysone encoding insect receptor. They have black nanodust for eyes. The CDC was involved in the cover-up and protects Monsanto and the Rio gene in Vitrogene. NATO and the UN, who contract with the U.S. military. This is a silent electrical biological weapon. You can pull glass shards and pebbles out of your scalp. This type of human warfare that is enacted upon us rewires your hair into fiber optics. That's powered by the EM fields and the wiring in your home. It's crazy that sounds. It's very advanced technology. It can happen through smart grids and all the things that are being sprayed, an amalgamation of things. This is also airborne, contracted through clothing and fibers. Everywhere you go, all doctors and dermatologists, and even at dermatologist conventions, call this a delusional parasitosis. But people have proven that they can create harmony in their bodies and get rid of morgellons. It hates sulfur. What it does is it actually changes your red blood cells into a star shape, and then it clones your DNA. This is wormwood. This is a gene therapy as a bioweapon, and the victim becomes a bioreactor. Just as in the Bible, Hasatan said skin for skin. He wants to change the temple. And the skin that was stretched around us, that God provided for us when we lost our light bodies, was to protect the elements from harming us. So Satan's always tried to get through our skin. And it's interesting, if you look at your human skin underneath a microscope, it looks just like snake cells. Lucifer, Enki had a genetic lab in Spica. What he did was make our bodies dense so that he could cross-contaminate them. Mars-Venus causes eclipses. The Kabbalah tries to put Mars above the sun. Mars flies over the abyss continually. The third heaven keeps us conflicted in a state of love and war. O-positive fallen angels had moon worship, like the Arabs, and worshipped Allah. The alphas, from Adam. The betas are from Eve. The RH, no, is very rare. Satan infected both the alphas of Adam and the betas of Eve with his fallen angelic matter. Disease and death got programmed into our blood. In the Garden of Eden, death was born. The Garden of Gethsemane is where death was overcame. He bled out with the help of Yeshua HaMashiach. Yehovah divides us by blood tapes. Our sins were nailed to that cross, not the word. Yeshua was in the oil press. And there's a reason why he talked about blood so much. The A negatives are the Native Americans from North America. They were blood brothers, and they shook their hands when they cut them so that they would know that they were from the same tribe. They're from the Church of Ephesus. A positive people shouldn't eat animal flesh or spot their garments. They are animal hybrids and from the Church of Sardis. B negatives are children of Gabriel, Noah's children incarnate. Betas come from Eve, Lilith, vampires. They're from the Church of Laodicea. If you read the Lost Books of Eden, there is the story of Adam and Eve, and Luluwalia was the name of Cain's sister. B positives, they need to atone for Eve's adultery. They're from the Church of Smyrna. AB negatives, Abiyah from Noah, Church of Philadelphia, along with the AB positives. O negatives, daughters of Pergamon's progeny and Lot. They're from the Church of Thyatira. O positives are from Cain, Pergamus, also hybrids. Omegas are the sons of perdition. RH positive are hybrids. RH negatives were pure. And when the infected RH positive baby was inside of the womb, the pure blood would attack it because it perceived it as a gene disruptor. The B positives were from Venus, berserkers. There's also a story about a lamb being slain in the garden, and why Jesus was called the lamb that was slain before the foundations of the world. And he actually spoke and said, I forgive you. I am the lamb that was slain before the foundation of the world. Now, Cain wasn't reconciled back to Adam's bloodline. Christ's atonement did that for us. Eve was seduced by the angel of death, Samael. And the MK Ultra programs also have an angel of death program where you become a martyr, become dead to yourself, And that is also, the head of that, I believe, is also Samael. Now, the enmity was the blood barrier in the garden, the seed of the RH negatives and the RH positives. The serpent in the garden was an animal cursed to eat dust and crawl on its belly, so we know it was an upright bipedal, talking, walking thing. And that changed the shape-shifting abilities, and that manifested in our eyes, because that's like cat eyes then. If you read Jasher 10, the spirits incarnate in our bodies were presented as serpents and scorpions. And I think that also has to do with the 1,000 Baal arches and the 1,000 points of light. That's still being ritually fed into this planet in certain grid points. And the 4 horns on the altar of the Ark of the Covenant could represent the ABO blood types. A negatives and AB negatives have an Anatolian bump on their head. Only those two do. Jacob and Esau's birthright is still being played out until the synagogue of Satan is removed fully and the Wailing Wall. Animals don't talk anymore, but I believe that they did in the garden. That Adam was predominant over the males and Eve was predominant over the females. And that the animal kingdom was pure and it was tainted and susceptible to death and cross-species diseases. I think it's called zoomorphic diseases. These tragic sins of our parental lineage cast us all into Nod, which led to despair. God knows us. He says we're as weak as dust. We're sleeping dust, but he makes us alive. The parable of Adam killing a lamb is Yeshua presenting himself and preparing himself from the foundation of the world, even back in the garden, for the world to accept him later on. There's also a story that Adam and Eve sprinkled the lamb's blood on the tree of life and changed the biology of the whole garden into panic. And there's reasons why the angels were so mad at them that they literally chased them out of the garden with flaming swords because of all the things that they were doing. Lucifer wanted them to worship him. So who knows how many times he deceived them and how many times that they listened to him. Now, I believe Adam and Eve made an altar, and this was the first Freemasonic altar. And the fig leaves that they formed and the handshakes and the tokens. This started the Brotherhood of Freemasonry, an exchange value commerce system. And Mormons still reenact this with their fig aprons and putting their deeds into their aprons to get them into heaven. So when Adam and Eve started doing all these crazy things, I think they prayed to God and the altar, and he didn't listen to them. And Elohim found them, and because of their acts in the garden, he said, "What have you done?" But their bodies were so spiritually dense that they couldn't hear him. And that's why he said, "Didn't you hear me?" Now this fig leaf apron also ties into God feeding them figs in the garden that were huge, since things were much bigger back then. And it would have lasted them about 40 days because he had them fasting 40 days in the garden. So when the stars shake from heaven, it'll be like figs falling from heaven. All right, back to Morgellons. Harold Vauskutz, I don't know how to pronounce his name. He has some really good information. The capstone on that I can say is that Morgellons is DNA-readable light photonic frequencies for artificial light harvesting in an aqueous self-assembly of electroluminescent double helical metallopolymers. These are incorporations of nanoparticles into polymersomes. Spectrofluorimetry with atomals sensitivity and photonic crystal fibers. That is a mouthful. Spectrofluorimetry with atomol sensitivity and photonic crystal fibers. Okay, so whatever all that scientific wording means, it is a readable signal, and what it does is it reads out emotions. Then they digitize those emotions and they broadcast it so that people can feel the same thing. And these are pre-trials, I think, of trying to broadcast a hive mind. Blue spectrums You know how bad blue lights are on electronics if you leave them on all the time. Blue represents thinking and red represents sexuality. So the fibers that are found in Morgellons are either blue or red usually. Sometimes there's a purple strand, but the main majority is blue and red. So thank you, Harold, for all your wonderful research. Proteus is a toxic bacteria from decaying animal matter. Proteus also means the name of God who could change shapes. Represented with snake legs is an amphibian who prophesied the future. He's the ruler of oceanic bodies, subject to Poseidon and the herdsman's seal maker. What they're doing in digital health that they're trying to push is put into us ingestible sensors, capsules, and patches. And a lot of these have torus shapes to them, which I find interesting. Now, there's a digital sequencing website about digitalization, and it's called the Nogoya Protocol, Nogoya, of digital DNA. There's trade agreements. They're called TRIPS, which is like the trip chair. They're called trade-related aspects of intellectual property because they perceive our memories as intellectual property vaults. A lot of this high-tech research plays right along with MK Ultra. Some other points I missed about wormwood. When I was studying wormwood, I found out that the Feast of the Wood Offering in Israel was a holy day to the Lord. It was on August 15th, AV, and it was a festival that was supposed to be fit for the altar and for the temple, where they gathered wood, like the pious ones and the priests. And they called it Tubav, as wood offering, and it was a great honor, and it was a holiday of love. So another name that Wormwood's mentioned is computer viruses and the screw tape letters, and a movie about a guy from Wisconsin that the CIA experimented on. Now, the Torah tells us that we should never eat any fruit that a worm has infested. So basically what Morgellons does is it turns you into a fruit fly. So in some of these scientific studies, they're using salamander, amphibian techniques to grow limbs. And they're using black soldier flies. And the black soldier fly is interesting because in the mythology of the phoenix, there is a worm that comes out of the phoenix as a serpent called Abraxas. And that phoenix, in the end day, becomes like a small bird that goes to Heliopolis. And it rises on the third day from fire, which also represents Lucifer, and travels to Egypt. There's also green Marvel characters named Absalom and Galactica that tie into this. Okay, so the cube symbolism. I also was thinking about the cube and how in heaven there will be, or there has been in the past, how the temple is measured and how it will be by cubits. And the cube unfolds into a cross and a tesseract, and this is a heavenly construct. But in 3D, we see it as a cube. Now, the elite copy everything because they know what's coming, and so they always create and counter realms to lead us into our damnation because time is short. So they use energy harvesting with things like the black cube and the Kaaba and other things. The cube unfolds, disclosing to the world. There's been black shapes in the suns that look like cube. And these are like Lucifer's ships that suck energy like spiders out of the sun. They are also called fire gourds. And the Nephilim may have implanted this type of gay gene that the government's also experimented on people with in their trans agenda. And it's also a gene disruptor. And we know that through environmental toxins, these hormones inside of us turn into xenoestrogens. So then you get 12-year-old boys on Prozac with breasts. The abyss, the ocean, unlocks data for all Roth's coin and Dragon coin. Digital money. The basilisk is found in the Vatican, the basilisk guy. We do not want to end up Judges 19, the woman that was left outside of the door, the unfaithful concubine, the unfaithful church. Now we know that Elohim talked and walked with us in the garden to our parents in the cool of the day, in the eve. Then Hasatan copied this as a bipedal walking, talking serpent, and pretended to be Yahweh as the voice of thunder in the gardens. Why he's called the father of lies. Now the latest Obama painting has lightning and a snake hidden above his head, it's being concealed in the leaves above his head. And he also has 6 fingers. God's always been the real thunder, the sons of thunder. Thunder accompanied the giving of the law at Sinai in Exodus 19:16. This was the voice of God. Job 37:2, Psalms 18:13, 81:7, John 12:29. In answer to Samuel's prayer, God sent thunder, and all the people greatly feared. For at such a season, the wheat harvest, thunder, and rain were almost unknown in Palestine. The glory of God thundered, and that's why Lucifer mimicked God's voice in the garden, pretending to be Yahweh. Yahweh also confused the Philistines with thunder in 1 Samuel 7:10, and his foes were visited of Yahweh of hosts with thunder, Isaiah 29:6. Thunder was regarded as the voice of Yahweh always. 7 sons of thunder. God thundered with the voice of his excellency, Job 37:4. God spoke to Jesus in the thunder, John 12:29. You can also do your own research on lightning. That's also pushed a lot in music and media. Now, Enoch states that we shot like lightning from stars, in fulguratio, sparks of creation. But we were more pure then, more of a silicate, crystalline part of us than our blood clothes, suppressed and harnessed. Our natures. Blood can't enter the kingdom of heaven. Blood clothes can change into liquid light at some point. The inner earth theory, or entrances and portals, but these are mainly abominations, I think, that things can come through. The Ancient of Days, the Son of Man scenario, Jackson, Missouri, all these places where they are preparing for the Nephilim to come back. When alien digital holotech, Disney Jesus is seen. The great falling away has already happened. The inner parts of Earth also connect to Walmart. Hillary Clinton is on the board of directors. There's been 3,400 Walmarts closed, I think. And there's tunnels to bases that lead to these underground cities. So there's a counterfeit black cube because heaven will be brought down. There will be no temple because we are the temple. Cubits were measured with the golden rod that unfolds, and there's an angel with the authority of fire that will come down and pour wrath over Israel. There are Jews, like I said in my other video, that will not have authority to make the last sacrifice. And many false Christs will walk into many temples built by hands of man. Even though the word clearly says God does not dwell in a temple made by the hands of man. There's many locations around the world. These are all false religions. Lucifer is at the top of every religion. The Bible clearly states that Christ's body was destroyed and he built it up again in 3 days. This ushers in a new dispensation of time. Heavenly tabernacle comes and he brings his kingdom down. He marries his bride. The physical joins the tabernacles, tabernacle of heaven and the tabernacle of earth in a feast. And this completion of the work done on the cross will be fulfilled. And we can have communion finally, eternally with the Elohim. Because this is part of the human family that chose to become the body. Those who received him. Those that he knows. In time and stars will fall from heaven. The glass ceiling will crack. Enoch says we rose like flashes of lightning, not fell in creation. At that point, in the end, we can take our place and we're given new names and we'll be able to build and terraform earth with our high priest, Yahushua HaMashiach, that is now not outside of the city but in it. And the rest of prophecy fulfilled. The Messianic reign. The angel in heaven burning incense on the golden altar. There's not one on earth. Now the parable about putting new wine into old wine sacks is our new light bodies. As our soul takes genetic signature of this body, our parental harmonics have to anchor it into the grids when we're born. Christ's energy needed to bridge two bloodlines and shook the earth when he was born. There was an angel guarding his passage and 4 archangels guarding his resurrection point and transfiguration. He needed to anchor his energy and frequency, and it shook the earth to lay the foundations in the physical to allow him to do the work on the cross. It was a celestial crossroads, an influx and outflux point, posts and points of the hosts of heaven that operated through and interacts with man more freely now. This made the way, and it prepares us for the end times. This power flowing from heaven, when confronted, will bring the earth and all its inhabitants to its knees. From the beginning, the Son of Man was hidden, eitz chaim. The Lord God formed man out of the dust of the earth and quickened him through the nostrils with the breath of life. The serpent is the earth body, the oribus, the flesh coat. The first child of Eve was born in darkness, and the second in light. The Lord wrote upon Cain's forehead, Asug sahibin, blood for the sake of self, a mark. If any find him, may kill him. He lost the voice of the Lord and went into darkness and to Nod. His heirs were the Canaanites. They were the tribes, the world's people. When Eve bore Seth, Cain slew him too. The sons of the righteous were sons of God, sons of earth and heaven. This was a twin duality that played out in the garden, even outside of the garden. They were Nod by this point. God's chosen, the tribes, grew mightier than the sons of God. And in Noah's time, they were washed off the face of the earth, but some tribes took their records underground. Not one left on the face of the earth, and so started the false Osiris texts. Osiris being a being that sits on a lake of fire and is guarding a lake of fire, who's also guarded by Thoth, located near the egg of creation. The tree of knowledge of good and evil was planted near this, supposedly by the great Sphinx pyramid. It was kept near there in the outskirts of the garden, which they called Cush, in a cave that Lilith and Lucifer dwelt. There was birds of heaven that lived atop the tree of life, the holy ones. Now there was also unclean cage birds that Revelations talks about. These were unholy and fallen winged beings. And the elite try to replicate holy fire even, I noticed. And in MK Ultra programs, like they tried to use a lot of people that had psychic abilities for pyrokinesis, trying to replicate holy fire that does burn you and doesn't burn you. Because God's holy fire was usually blue and it didn't burn you. Like he appeared to Moses in the burning bush. He has ministers of fire. Holy of hosts. In epigenetics and the movie Catching Fire, or the words Catching Fire, they're trying to activate fire letters in the DNA. And it is my belief that in the end times, Enoch and Elijah will be the 2 witnesses, out of whose mouths will prophesy all that God has let them see by now, since they have seen more than any 2 people in the history of this earth. And Enoch specifically describes himself as no man has ever seen things as I have seen them. So there will be a time appointed when he does return, since God translated them and he is saving them for a future purpose. Now, one more thing about the, MK Ultra programs is that advanced neural monitoring was done by DARPA. And these are technologies that have full on-screen access to EEG data. First Enoch 62:7 says there are old souls operating 4, 5, 6-dimensional frequency harmonics that will either reject the body or the young 3D earth frequency body will fall apart. This can happen in crib death. Babies die the first day. There's fetal frequency altering, walk-ins, or they're put back into the mother's womb. There's radio frequency plasma used for bioactivation that they use in current meshes today. Medical meshes. The root races, we seem to have physical strands that are partially complete or activated, sealed, or with imprints that had potential to activate the grounding codes to ascend. The original meaning behind the 666 seal was that the 6th base tone of the first DNA strand, 6th base tone of the 5th DNA strand, and 6th base tone of the 6th DNA strand were all removed from the morphogenetic field. 666 figured prominently in the earliest buildings of the Great Pyramid because this seal had been applied to a portion of the Syrian Anunnaki who created the machine. This incomplete tesseract keep man from transfiguring through the Christ door. The carbon code. The millennium is a transitional period in which linear time gradually dissolves but does not completely disappear until the very end. Perhaps the etheric tide onsets gradual delocalization and decoherence of the wave function defining our existence. For some time, linear timelines, parallel timelines, and alternate futures would still exist, and timeline dynamics would still be in effect. Only at the end of the millennium would the world dream completely end and all this timeline business be put to rest. The time war could only exist until the end of time, and hence in the book of Revelations, there's one final battle before we all go home. The tyranny of ancient Rome and the burgeoning tyranny of New World Order, and two instances of the same transcendental thing, the Black Iron Prison, the Matrix control system, the realm of the corrupt demiurge. Babylon is fallen. Uriel is a very important key figure, identified as one of the angels who helped bury Adam and Abel in paradise, because the earth spat up Cain because it was ready to receive Adam only first, and it was mocking Cain by trying to hide the body. So Uriel checked Egypt's doors for the lamb's blood in the time of the plague, and he holds the keys to the pit in the end times, and he also led Abraham to the west. He protected men from the Watchers, the angel of poetry, and he's also one of the holy Sephiroth. Uriel is the destroyer of the hosts of Sennacherib and guards Tartarus after judgment. Has been brought on the Nephilim and the fallen ones, including the two main leaders, Samyaza and Azazel. And Uriel always discusses their fates. Now the hexagram, you can see in stained glass windows at churches. If you look down this symbol in a bird's eye view, you're looking down into a DNA shaft. And that is a key to pyrokinesis. These other land masses that they have been hiding from us are forbidden zones, no-fly zones, forbidden fruit, Prometheus flying too close to the sun, getting his wings burnt. The areas that are close to where the angels put the flaming swords, but block its way back to Eden. These flaming swords could be suns in themselves. The Kabbalah has a flaming sword right down the middle of it. Other beings in the garden before Adam and Eve were placed there. These were forgotten children that were omitted from the scriptural text and the invasion of the garden. There are 7 root races. We are emanated in an embryonic likeness and image of God. Genesis 2 through 6 was where the seed wars started. At the center of your being, the tree of life dwells. The devil's tower is actually body pieces and parts of human giants and have been tested for human DNA. The Luciferian rebellion started a long time ago. Cain was the first hybridized human turned vampiric. Leviathan and the trees. Job 40:17 says he makes his tail stiff like a cedar and his sinews are knit together. Pangea could be part of Florida when Pangea split up, and parts of Egypt and the Red Sea. Hawaii, the Canary Islands, all have traces of our ancient history. Hawaii is the top of mountains left over from Lemuria even. Okay, so they're doing a lot of cloud seeding. They're naming new clouds every week, blocking out and breaking up clouds. They're concealing crafts in clouds and changing so much and replicating the weather. And there's even a movie called The Cloud. So they're trying to promote this clouds as a sidereal version and means of us gaining some kind of technological security and longevity in the long run. And they want us to forget that the real clouds are opening up straight from heaven. And those are the ones that we need to rise up into and meet our Savior Yeshua in. So we kind of have blinders on when we get so involved in this technology. We're permitted to understand the mysteries of the kingdom where others are not. God's word says this. He says what little understanding they have, the ones that forfeited their real glory and eternal rest will be taken from them. So the more you accept the beast system and want to upload your consciousness into a cloud, if given the chance, everything you know now or everything that God has shown you up to that point will be taken away from you. In the end, it's all or nothing, and God will accept nothing else. Not a half-ass offering going against his perfect will. If our minds are stuck in a cloud somewhere, we know that in Revelation it says there'll be no more sun because his light will illuminate everything. So there'll be no more dreaming, no more night, no more of this terror. God blesses those who don't fall away from him. The kingdom is near, and all spiritual things will be manifested and merged into this physicality as a final kingdom. And we'll be tempted and tried to be lured out of every trapdoor to bypass the glory that is coming in the clouds. Now, these other districts in the MK Ultra program were training simulation centers. That's why sometimes it felt like you were in an astral realm or a different locality. There's a movie called Another World, and they're trying to show all this fractalization of things when that's not the truth. It was more like an etheric realm. And I have memories of being in a magnetic white pod that had black on it and a glass hood, and it went inside of a portal inside of the earth, and somehow it messed with your magnetism and your EM fields, and you could transfer your consciousness and swap memories with someone. Like it had flipped it upside down, and you were traveling along Earth's magnetic lines through these tunnels. Now, there's a movie called Altered Carbon that also represents 666. And carbon reminds me of the Hebrew word korban, Korban, which means altered sacrifice. And I think it's trying to promote an altered sacrifice to the AI God instead of the real God. Because korban means a gift devoted to God, and it's commanded in the Torah as an animal sacrifice, a peace offering, olah, or holocaust. So it describes the head in the clouds, which is nothing more than uploading your consciousness into a cloud in this movie. Cities in the clouds, floating cities, instances. Some are actual digital hollow realms, but some can be holographic cities in clouds, like a blue beam projection. But they are doing so much with digitization that it is possible at this time that they are actual places and pockets in space and time where clones can separate if you upload your consciousness to the cloud. And you can work as a clone astrally. You can work as an antenna relay system, an REM, in a loop with uncompleted scenes and sequences. So these, to me, are counterfeit spiritual realms made into a dreamlike, drug-induced dark city scenario. When I've recalled these, I've been in high rises in these dark cities like Gotham City, which that movie Gotham, portrays the Court of Owls, which is just the Order of the White Lion Society, and the A-pin and L-pin grid lattice systems put in place by the negative alien agendas. Now, these, not only in the movie Gotham, but in these counterfeit spiritual realms themselves, these beings represent the Watchers that operate from dimensions controlling certain bloodlines in human bodies. And I've seen these when I was by the age of 5, and I came face to face with them. They're just ancient ones that control people's bodies. All leaders are a form of sentient AI in this day and age. So, land of nods, kind of like nether realms. What I saw in these places were white female clones. If they tried to trick you in some way, or you thought they were shutting down, or you could paralyze them somehow, their mouths would open and reveal these sharp nano teeth that were like white blobs too, as a defense system, some type of mechanic system. But those were not good places to be stuck in. Digital hellish realms. So the cloud is very important to grasp in the scriptures, and not only in this time, synthetic versus real clouds. Jesus is described as a white horse riding on the clouds with the armies of heaven. And that will be an opening from the windows straight from heaven. And we need to be in those clouds. And those are the clouds that they don't want us to see. Now, in MK Ultra experiments, they also use regeneration experiments, like a starfish to grow an extra limb. The American eagle is actually a phoenix that dies, and it builds a nest, and from its bones of its parents, a worm forms, and born out of that is an S shape, and that's reborn. England building has one of these S shapes representing the phoenix in its National Archives, which has 72 columns, and a DC building. And there's a worm beneath the throne of destiny and the Omega symbol on the dollar bill, etc. So America's destined to become the phoenix. And after 500 years, people brought it frankincense and myrrh from Arabia, and then it flew away to Heliopolis. So America represents the 33rd degree of Freemasonry, really. More about numbers. The 101 Nicholson, 1968, and Anthony Patch go into good detail about the 101 and the RSE channel too. But to me, the 101 is also about the bytes and the megabytes and breaking through like the skin of this realm and the takeover of the human form into the Borg, into the draconian worm, which is the act and purpose of wormwood that burrows through all the elements, comprising man and offering him as a sacrifice to the AI metal god, instead of being refined naturally, as Christ showed us how it's done to the true God and the councils of Elohim and celestials, the 24 elders that surround the throne. They copy all of this. 120 years equals 3 trinities, diagrams, diamonds, broken diamonds are 2 trinities. The axis mundi is represented as a diamond. Diamond programming was the highest in MKL to program, and if you study diamond and navel in the Bible, it'll describe a lot of what those 2 words mean, because we are more precious than diamonds and our strength comes from the navel. And God talks about the navel a lot, the navel of the earth, the center of God's domed earth. So the highest intelligence is obviously naval intelligence. Now, above the binary domain is the Trinity, the trinary sequences that break the spell of quantum aspects of L, because their acceleration levels up to the God realm, the pure L of electricity, the archetypes, the inner spiritual, the outer physical, the 3 layers of the inner mysteries of the Torah, the trinitized sons of supremacy, the externals of days, the ancient of days, perfection of days, recent of days, union of days, faithful of days, perfectos of wisdom, divine counselors, universal censors, spiritual realms, speaking backwards. So this is why the demons need to be made mute. Joachim and Boaz are supercomputers, representing 2 pillars, breaking through to create a new race, the new pillar. There's coding and electricity that usually works backwards, an electrical wiring system. And there's reasons why there's backmasking and why the demonic realm speaks backwards. So the AI God wants us to keep staying in density so that he can tangibly access us to be able to rearrange the temple. But if you wear the full armor of God, he's not able to do that. By fire, the dross of metal is burned and cast out, leaving that which is pure. So God created the righteous with light from his countenance. His chosen go deliver the wicked and make them clean with water and fire, and find a star in every soul. Each deliverer is as a sun, which these stars congregate. His exalted ones are in the highest heavens, purified with the rod of fire because of their supremacy. So they understand these dynamics. Stairway to heaven comes through receiving of the Holy Spirit, catching fire. If any man climbs in another way, that man is a thief and a robber, but he who enters in by the door is the shepherd of the flock, and to that man the gatekeeper opens. I am the good shepherd, and I know all by my name. We are bombarded with distractions to want to become more like the counterfeit shiny ones, instead of Christ's perfect example he set before us. So they have this crazy Frankenstein cookie cutter science out there now that's synthesizing digitized biology into programmable matter and claytronics. Quantum computers can be ones and zeros simultaneously. Molecules can be plugged into a laptop and formed into actual DNA cubes. Yes. And these DNA cubes can be created and sent to your door. You can order designer DNA. There are TED Talks about DNA nanorobots that are using universal computing in an animal. These are all predecessors and pre-trials to the hive mind. Because the Holy of Holies is the cubes, and the cubes are the building blocks of life, the qubits. Temple being measured in qubits. Qubits getting energy and info from other dimensions and deep freeze zones in the quantum computers. It is the spirit that quickeneth the flesh, quickeneth. The flesh profiteth nothing. John 6:33. For ye are bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. Elohim says, I am glorified in them. John 17:10. This is the Edenic restoration. This is the capstone of creation. This is our divine inheritance. The Elohim said, walk before me and be thou perfect. We have synchro ignominiously failed to do this. According to the predestination before the world was, the elect were said to come in a dispensation in time. As a remnant of what was before, we walked and talked with them as Noah and others did. This group of creators is far above and more ancient than any aliens, but the originals, holding our original images beyond the 11th dimension. We have seen the sign of Jonah. We're in the belly of the beast. Globe worship is a form of idolatry because it distracts us from seeing God and remembering our walk in spirit with Him. The 101, the 911, the IXXI, Roman Catholicism, 11 represented in Stranger Things. There's so many symbols on buildings and astral traps. The internet is a domain. It's a place of rulership. It holds certain names that are used for this purpose. Quantum tunneling is what it uses, and it goes back to Babylon and the obelisks. The internet was created by CERN, and they're also holding Nimrod's DNA and the head of Osiris. With DNA, we have more atomic and free will power backing up their inorganic devices. This is an unpackaging work. DNA banks are databases. Patented human genome happened when the first false flag happened, and it was done in the high courts of Pennsylvania. Everyone has a particular set of a human genome, though. This also laid out a means by which they could bring out the legalization of hybridization eventually, and the scientific work that's actually done in the basis to be brought up on the surface to the public when the Black Awakening happens, when the time is right. So people like myself who are DNA repositories and subject to experimentation and EM fields experimented on. With leaps in technocracy, we do need to still realize that Egypt doesn't have all that we want. It's the same old spell that prevents us from seeing Christ, who's not the reptilian eye god on the dollar bills. All we need is our real creator and to recognize him in all things and to let him live in our hearts as the foundation stone so we don't reject him. He makes us living stones. We're the stones that build the temple. We're the stones that hold all of it together as the body. These stones need to make the reparations and partitions to build the third temple up. It was he, Yahushua, who was in the pre-existence, slain from the foundations of the world. Since he's our beginning and will be our end, all satanic sacrifices in every culture were just copying the only sacrifice ever needed and mocking him the whole time. We need to make him our cornerstone, the one that the builders rejected and the Freemasons still continue to. Every degree they take and oaths they form is allegiance to many false gods. It only puts them under more curses and seals their fate in a dark prison, a tomb that will not open and see the light of day. We need to go through the spiritual refiner's fire process. So our names are written in the book of life and stay there with that staying power. The alchemists tried to turn base metals to gold without the spiritual refinement aspect, and that made them crazy. And they snorted monatomic gold and tried to pass through stargates like Akhenaten and got addicted and snorted the uranium left over from bodies going through places they shouldn't have. So eventually their bodies became debased. We need to accept that we're in a state and that we can't ascend by ourselves. It's the same lie perpetuating itself, and it looks appealing. The fallen have used gold for the atmosphere, and they've pretty much eaten up most of it on this planet. Our bodies degenerated. Those guys, they needed it for survival. The truth is that Christ is the first fruits of the resurrection. He's the breath of life and the bread of life. So when you know him, you don't want for more, and you don't chase after things of this world, and you realize that you're not part of a kingdom that's just anchored in 3D. You're part of a kingdom that's not of this world. So that's your hope and your glory. So we actually are given resurrection powers. They're just dormant within us. And the heavenly transfigurative phases will initiate one day. They're embedded in us. The fallen gave up that first estate. They don't have it. They use counterfeit ascension techniques and technology to try to resurrect themselves and to keep themselves from dying eternally, because the fear is of eternal. Since we are eternal creatures and we have an eternal soul, and that's how Christ sees us, then we need to ask ourselves every day what direction we're heading. where we want to spend the rest of our eternity. So, well, I guess back to Uriel. Uriel says, "Here shall stand the angels who have connected themselves with women, and their spirits assuming many different forms that are defiling mankind and leading them astray into sacrificing to demons as God, till the day of the great judgment in which they shall be judged, till they are made an end of. And the women also of the angels who went astray shall become sirens. And Enoch saw the vision, the ends of all things, and no man saw as he did." So the Torah, the 5 shapes, Torah, it was all given for reasons, and it was to bring us into relationship each step more and more with God, and to understand his nature by the bones of our bodies, the 613 bones matching the structure of the Torah. The original human form was much bigger. That's why God talks about the skeleton army and raising us up as the skeleton army, the dry bones in the valley of dry bones, the golden fleece buffer zone, I call it, where our veil of protection holds us. And the spirit fire shields us from degenerative recombinant DNA attacks, when we're put through the refiner's fire, we have that dross fall off, and will be purified enough to stand and to use the holy angel fire to assist Christ in cleansing the earth. Those who can't stand in his presence will perish. The Torah was given to make us stand upright before God, and Jesus was the example of someone who did it perfectly. And he wants us to follow in that and to take up our cross and to go through it with him, which means understanding it and doing exactly what he did. Now, when you bless your food, it's very important because there's barcode gates for scavenger demons to come through there. It's beast tech coding. We've allowed ourselves to merge with through digital wavelengths and technology and our EM fields and chips in our monetary system. So it's very important at this time to dedicate all your electronic devices to God, your cars, your possessions, everything. Because the fallen's heavenly armor was stripped off, they operate through matter and dimensions and data streaming. The truth is, all creation belongs to the Father. He'll take it all back one day. There's nothing here that's permanent. Everything is transitory, transpositional, transubstantiating, and translucent to heaven's eye. We are literally in a sea of glass and fire, as the Bible states. There's no other name under heaven by which this world will surrender and bow to, and every knee, every tongue confess. When the groaning of creation comes to a halt, when we're forced to meet our Maker and come to the judgment seat, you don't want to wish you had been ready for that. There's a point in time in this dual binary system where it will dissolve. It says all things will go and dissolve into higher or lower dimensions. Like Operation Fishbowl, we see through the glass darkly, but one day face to face. They've tried to block out so much that we can't see, but we know that we will see clearly face to face one day. As angels loose and bind the strongholds of earth, the great central sun, the temple of Abraham and Sarah, will understand, along with the star glyphs that are imposed on our neural synapses that have imprinted and encoded in our DNA as a map of the heavenly realms. We already know so much. Coming down here and remembering is just a process. Our brain interprets signals into light and sound frequencies, like crystalline receivers, silicate networking, signals to noise. So when they do all this stuff with their fake clouds and their fake weather and their fake skies, they send out signals so that those who are not alive, literally spiritually alive in Christ, will only hear a signal, not the Father's voice. And they respond to a signal. These crystalline receivers that they copied from our bodies were copied in like TV diodes, and what they're doing is really just replicating the nature of us, the human construct, and they're portraying it as something distorted in a different form on computer screens, which are just a copy of one aspect of our brain. We're the living library of info and knowledge, but the thing is, we still have the opportunity to partake of the tree of life. So water and electricity, we're composed of both, but they're not compatible. They're dual nature. We have luminous energy fields. There's LEFs, reverse ELFs, to hone down our fields. There's missing strands on the outer edges of our ELFs and our membranes, and brain scans show luminescent spots, matter. They ignore these points. But these points are anchoring points for shiny BBs or implants, where there's traces of nanolaces or reptilian stone eggs. And they also map out the Earth's body and tag and implant ley lines. Astrocartography reflects the astral manifestations of this practice and reflects the microcosm and the macrocosm. Even our sphenoid bone resembles the Ark of the Covenant, and the eye structure represents the firmament shape. So much word magic. Hurrah, Horus, scope. These are watered-down versions of the astronomy of seeing the signs of the times, not used for personal gains. False sciences that lead man's destiny astray. See suns, seasons, horizon, Horus zones, rise, Ra, Isis, sunset, setting with Ra. Also in the program, some of us were used to see the faces in creation. If you were a person who could see faces in anything, you were highly valued. Kind of like looking down at a map of an area and seeing like a meridian of Greenwich concealing Atlantis because you could see a face of something and then connect the dots. So as the glaciers are melting, there's deadly viruses being released too. These are called diatoms, DIEATOMS. They're really pushing for this diatom too in a lot of science magazines. What these are dinoflagellates, diatoms, protists, fungi with kaleidoscope patterns. They're bioluminescent algae, phycology. They're targeting diseases with this biosilica. They're torus shapes. They have 8 figures. They're also used as nanofibers and supposedly used as anti-cancer meshes. But anyways, they're a plethora of shapes. The cool thing is about science is that you could use it for good, not for bad. For instance, you could heal the soil with microremediation, which is mushroom healing, because mushrooms can absorb high amounts of radiation and toxins. And clay can heal water. Black mica clay. Microscopic world is actually astounding. Next thing I want to talk about is the prison planet, us. Dipoles and polarity. Water and electricity currents that are running through us. Water molecules have electric dipole moments. Other molecules are isolated. Atoms don't. This happens when we place them in an external electric field. This field distorts the electrons' orbits. This separates their centers into a positive or negative charge. The electrons, this shifts and sets up a dipole moment pointing in the direction of the field. So you have to look at this from a higher dimension. Electrons shift and this sets up a dipole moment pointing in the direction of the field. This is talking about our nature too. North and south pole being the same, remember. Electricity works from negative to positive. This dipole moment is induced by the atom or molecule and is polarized by the field. So it has a positive or negative field side. Now the biochip formula has the word a di in it also. And when this field is removed, it induces a dipole moment and polarization disappears. So this is about perception. This shows us we live in a subjective phase conjugating reality as parts of a greater body. Each atom has its own field, literally. And the Bible talks about the field being ripe for the harvest. And in the end, the world will roll up like a scroll and all our fields will be reaped. The earth is made like a plate, flooding and receding and land masses. We're all not one, though. That law of one is a Thothian law. God knows us distinctly and intimately when we come into this matrix and we merge our soul matrix here and become mission-induced, just like these dipoles. Mission-induced and oriented. We have one self God knows the complexities of, and our soul and spirit are different as long that operate through our mind interface. Mind, soul, and spirit. The monopole theory in quantum physics describes spirals of compressing hydrogen molecules making a change. Phase conjugation. This produces a time-reversed wave. Phase, time, reverse, mirror happens. phase time conjugate, reverse mirror happens, black hole, black mirror tech. It describes gravity, the aether, as this phase conjugated wave of charge accelerating towards the center. The phase conjugate golden ratio converted to longitudinal EMF superluminal means faster than light. This creates a uniformity of charge distribution as quantum foam, making black holes as gravity disappear. This is how the scientists describe it. They describe infinite compression as what practicality is mathematically proven to be. Infinite compression is what practicality is mathematically proven to be. Practicality is the principle, the golden ratio is. Super soldiers were being hooked up to beast tech and smashed into tiny pieces electromagnetically. DNA is priceless. Epigenetics describes that when the body is stressed, there are bundles of genetic code that come undone. These are expressed, and these cancer cells are like turning on certain cells and turning other cells off. This comes unpacked and unzipped. The bundles detangle themselves, caused by activation, transcription, factor 2, ATF2, that's necessary for the bundles to form. In epigenetics, it's shown to carry on traits to offspring. Chromosomes, muscle memory are learned from this. It can be traced, reversed, even electronically or chemically. Like sodium pentanol, the truth serum. Reverse that, and you have an injection to erase memory banks. So the amazing thing about our DNA also is that it can store all the world's DNA in one room. 1 gigabyte stores 215 petabytes, 250 million gigabytes. This is a preservation. It's ultra compact. It won't degrade. Why they want to use digital DNA. Scientists are storing digital DNA since 2012. They encoded it into 52,000 words, into thousands of smaller pieces of DNA, and converted digital files in a code. They encoded it into ones and zeros in a binary code. So then they compress them in a single file and split that data again into a short binary code and repackaged those droplets in a water molecule and assembled them in proper order. This was called DNA fountain. This was a synthetic stops and inputs in naturally occurring substrand matrices containing memory. This created a new algorithm, DNA sequencing technology that's fed into a computer, and then it was translated genetic code back to the binary system, and this allowed researchers to access the original files, retrieval systems. So there weren't any errors in these new files. That was ensured. There were unlimited numbers of these copies made, used for DNA replication, and they put data on it. It's like putting data on a disk, but you're actually putting it on a water drop. Think about how much storage that could be in water. They use this for melding machine with man. They don't really need trauma-based mind control or hypnosis so much anymore for hiding information when they have these digital injections. For better syncing with the organic, with quantum computers. I've had digital injections, and they're very hard to explain. But this technology is out there. It's copying techniques. 1.6 bits of data per nucleotide. Information's fed into the supercomputer then. This gets broadcast and it's nanoprogrammed. So in the cloning world, this could be pretty crazy. And I also know that through digital sigils, there's also spirit technology that's used for black magic. So demons can open digital portals and gain access to us. They're like synthetics through black screens, neurosyncing, neurotelepathy, goetic symbols, fire and water, blue and red, hell freezing over, red, fire, blue, water, the electrical aspects of us. It's the reason why police use the red, white, blue. This emits, it promotes a response of fear and negativity from us, basically. So these demonic symbols can be found in wiring blueprints. As I said, when your spiritual eyes are open, you can see the patterns these designs. This is a spell casting work, and they're showing it in a lot of commercials and movies too. Mind control, spirits, and you accept false information. Like I said before, there's just two supercomputers named Joachim and Boaz. And that is names of the two pillars. The reason why Jesus wore the purple robe, the blending of the two colors of the pillars, creating a new temple of man between the two. So basically with what I'm trying to get with these digital injections is that information can be put in vaccinations. So they can have spells associated with symbols attached to them. And like I said before, the demonic speaks and mirrors reality backwards. Now they can manipulate electrons at an atomic level to store information. And this can redirect us from clean energy and clean energy from the sun and forms of it. Because they want us to see in the dark like them, like insects, basically. We'll be powered up, though, when Christ comes to claim back the earth. He's already reigning in heaven. He just needs to come claim the earth. So electricity is wired to work backwards, like I said, negative to positive. And these static distortions can create supernatural experiences with static, like you're caught in between. Horror movies show static beings. There's a reason for that, because there's a language of diodes that gives power to elemental realms. And there's smaller things that we don't see in life. Even in Dianetics, if you were receiving false information about yourself, they called it a demon circuit. That's information that's played on a loop in your head that you say to yourself that's not true. So electricity has circuit maps and computer boards and chips. These sigils are used to summon demons, actually. These schematics are designed to usurp our time and energy. And if we're using our devices for vanity, greed, and wrong purposes, these logos and symbols can have power over us. Just as there's territorial spirits over geographic areas, there's the same thing going on in digital realms. Jesus's beard is described as electric. And we can activate and share DNA. And I'm sure he did that even through the stargates of his eyes. The Shroud of Turin is not Yahushua, it's Cernunnos, and they're going to take that DNA and extract it and try to clone an Antichrist with it. So there's a lot of information overload that comes with the internet, and it can be used against us, and it can be parasitical. So you have to guard yourself against a lot of tech. Because when you're so into the world and so into these things, your soul can't even recognize simple truths. So you have to actually step back and totally detox from all of that. I know in the end we'll have resurrected bodies. So right now, transhumanism is creating a counterfeit version of that. We can have access to consciousness holistically, though. We can recall at will and memory repair. All we do is locate our time lines and create time tabs. These are like facsimiles, and sort ourselves out. In studies, diseased areas are actually just out of phase. They have seen the sine waves that emanate from the spine, and they create spikes, which are just misaligned wave patterns that go up and down the spine, and then they can replicate that with a device and re-radiate it into diseased areas in reverse. So 180 degrees out of phase conjugating sequence, time reversal, fallen angel technology again, death spiral, death star, death science, promoting death culture society. The Rife machine was invented by Royal Rife. Hulda Clark has an ionic pulsar. These both can be used to align wave patterns and stabilize vibrational fields, vibropathics. And what this does is it holds you in a neutral state for a second, and that healing can happen in that second because it creates a space where the positive and negative cancel each other out. So it's a neutral zone. Space recreates the correct spin, creating healthy conditions. So there's ways that we can heal, and it comes through neutrality and moments of being out of the duality. And the Holy Spirit has that power to do that and to purify our blood every 7 seconds. Cancer cells spin to the right, and they should be spinning the opposite direction, kind of like reverse osmosis water. We should be looking at ourselves like that and saying we need to spiral back up to God, not spiral down to the pit. So some fallen angel tech are archonic etheric implants. These are jelly crab-like tentacles, like I said, going around the gallbladder meridian. They go around the corner of the eye and wrap around the ear and the temple and the head and the neck. I've seen some of these implants in people and taken some out of myself. So you need to clear the liver and the gallbladder channels. And what these implants can do is mimic your thoughts and your voice and create voice pattern recognition within you as a host brain pattern of chemistry. And the implant can take time to listen. This is an artificial entity, and it's in your central nervous system, and it stimulates it in parts so that you're on an autonomic response time and like autopilot. So your spinal nerves and spinal cord are compressed by it, and it hardwires into your brain to react automatically. So your brain thinks it's receiving some self-impulse thoughts, but the temporal lobe pulses and spikes, and you can kind of hear cracking and electrical noise when you get these things out of your body. There's technology that can try to pull you out of your body and push your spirit or your soul into something else. I've experienced this before too. And TAMI was the original thought interface or thought amplified interface mind system, and U.S. documents prove this. Office of Director of National Intelligence. Odni, ODNI 2, Odin, Green Door, that the Queen sits across from, Lucifer's Emerald Tablet. Some of the names of this stuff, documents you can look up are 7-Day Biodefense, Advanced Structural Fibers, called ASFs, Blood Farming, PHARMING, Autonomous Robotic Manipulation, called ARMS, H1N1 Acceleration, that was Blue Angel, Nano Air Vehicle, NAVs, Prophecy Pathogen Defeat, Systems of Neuromorphic Adaptive Plastics, Scalable Electronics, Synapse Recovery, Project Surrogate, Project Bleak, Project Abandon, Equalize, Live On, Tailboat, Ravensky, Pink Mist, 714, Cyanide, Torpedo, Eyes On, Purple Mist, Stinky Eye, and Stargate. Operation Cyanide 2. The neural electrical activity has been correlated with different states of awareness. Since children don't display neural electrical activity associated with conscious awareness until after 6 years, they spend the first 6 years in a state referred to as a hypnagogic trance. It's the same state that hypnotists induce to implant suggestions to the subconscious mind. All patterns of behavior emerge from experiences where conscious processing is absent or suspended, remain below the level of conscious awareness, and tends to be repeated. There's also implants that are used in key planetary areas in quadrants. This is, they instruct humans' nervous systems to release a life force. So it's a type of energy harvesting, the lotus eaters. The alien implant module. There's also a movie, Patient 17, that proves that there's 52 elements created and taken out of this man's implant in his leg. There's archonic genetically engineered entities, suppressor parasites, reptilian stone eggs that have to do with Emerald City programming. They're lodged in the skull's membranes. There's small black-shaped implants that have additional wiring. There's chest to heart harnesses, dodecahedron, mind control. That one is called Metatron's Cube. There's etheric weaponry, like knives and arrows being thrown at you, which is interesting because their children are called quivers of arrows in the Bible when they're brought up in righteousness. Nano poison stings can be used. And nanotech can also release things in your body like snake venom to be used against you. So there's a few things I want to go over about cloning. In REM clones, the original can be chipped in the head. You're in a lucid dreamlike state, theta, delta, open modes. The duplicate is also chipped. The electrical brain link is formed with a broadcasting network sent from any sending frequency of a suitable transmitter, like Freeview, SkyCell MAST, 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 MT. The consciousness is piggybacked on the broadcasting frequencies and picked up by the chip on the clone. So a person controls the clone from the thoughts of the original, and the bioelectrical field gets cataloged, then Signet, SIGNIT, tracks you, tags you, your BEF and your EMF onto a supercomputer so that the AI can control you and is cued into you at that point. So you're seen by the mother AI then. Your frequency becomes less synthetic and more like nature, and you can hide it from the AI when you get the heavy metals and cybernetics out of your body, or the biofilms. Anybody can be hacked in 5 minutes. Clones can work astrally because they are a copy of you. They are implanted and psychic. They prefer Rh negative or O negative left-handed people. Intelligence agencies favor these because they're right brain dominant. So if you let them and are tricked through implied consent into some type of soul transference vessel, they've perfected this over thousands of years, soul transference, etc., through these dark arts. They're really just radio waves, because DNA is an antenna, like Jacob's ladder. Stone of Scone. Standard duplicate clone is an exact copy of an original. It's replaced. If it's replaced, it can lead a double life, like a twin, but it has a different personality and memories from the original, and it's learned from its behavior traits. In the bases, the kids were twin paired and trauma bonded. So we recognized each other later in life, and we could feel each other over distances due to the technology in our heads. And that is another reason why they didn't want us leaving the country. So if you meet your clone, it can be dangerous. That can be a timeline convergence, memory retrieval. EEG cloning is where they can record everything and download and upload EEG activities and mannerisms onto a supercomputer. They call these God helmets, which mocks the helmet of salvation, and actually time traveling with the Lord in spirit, and like he translated Enoch's progeny in the flesh with him. So like I said before, advanced neural monitoring came from DARPA. Technologies have full on-screen access to the EEG data. They can delete and change and implant false memories at will. They can upload it into a microchip and insert it into a clone. The original can go through narcohypnosis or psycho-alterations like trip chair units. If the original is ever killed, this ensures that no brain and body connection link is remaining. The DNA, is bilocated and can be quantumly entangled. So this is more about the blank page slate beast tech. And I believe the best souls are here right now. That will be the ones that make it to the end. The great souls that are here now to overcome the beasts. Because the Bible says it does not matter if you are strong. What matters if you will be one of the ones who make it to the end. And he will gather his elect if you're one of them. So what I'll leave you with is some thoughts on remote neural monitoring. What that does is it works to remotely control the brain in order to read and detect criminal thoughts taking place inside of the mind. The human brain thinks at a rate about 5,000 bits per second. It has a distinctive set of bioelectrical resonance system. And the supercomputers can send messages through an implanted person's nervous system to influence their performance in a desired way. It's been developed for like 80 years with neuroelectromagnetic involuntary human experimentations. There's DNA microchips that can be implanted in the human brain, which makes it inherently controllable. They're already using biomaterial for 3D printing in certain hospitals even. So think about what they're doing still behind the shadows. So it's possible to read and control a person's emotional thought processes along with subconscious stuff and also dreams. So supercomputers are monitoring millions of people simultaneously with a speed of 20 billion bits per second. It has a set of certain programs functioning at different levels, like the signals intelligence system, which uses the EMFs and that stimulates the brain for remote neural monitoring and the electronic brain link, the EBL, electronic brain link. The EMF brain stimulation systems, it was designed as radiation intelligence, and that meant it was receiving information from inadvertently originated electromagnetic waves in the environment. But they say it's not related to radioactivity or nuclear detonation, but I believe there's been experiments where it slightly has. Recording machines in the signals intelligence system have electronic equipment that investigate electrical activity in humans from a distance. This computer-generated brain mapping can constantly monitor all electrical activities in the brain. The recording aid system decodes individual brain maps for security purposes. So, electronic evaluation. It's constantly scanning. Electrical activity in the speech center of the brain can be translated into the subject's verbal thoughts. It can send encoded signals to the auditory cortex of the brain, directly bypassing the ear. They can also do a chip in the hippocampus. This encoding helps in detecting audio communication. It can perform electrical mapping of the brain's activity from the visual center of the brain, and it bypasses the eyes and the optic nerves and projects images from the subject's brain onto a video monitor. So this thing about the Pope having technology to hear or know our thoughts is just a scare tactic, because what they're trying to hack into is holy information. And the thing that Satan doesn't have on us is that he can't read our thoughts, and he can only, manipulate and extract things from our body, but our thoughts can still remain hidden. And the conversations you have with God, still, if they projected and extracted an image out of your brain, it's still not the same thing as being able to directly hear your thoughts. But they can do synthetic telepathy and visual and audio memory. It's just visualized and analyzed, and the system just analyzes all this stuff, and it remotely and non-invasively detects information by digitally decoding the evoked potentials and 30 to 50 hertz, 5 milliwatt electromagnetic emissions from the brain. That's just a pebble of what our brains can do. The nerves produce a shifting electrical pattern with a shifting magnetic flux, which puts on a constant amount of electromagnetic waves. You can constantly rearrange these too, and there's ways to hide from this tech. And one thought can change at the speed of light. There are spikes and patterns which are called evoked potentials in the electromagnetic emissions from the brain. The interesting part about this is this exercise is carried out with any physical contact. The EMF emissions from the brain can be decoded into current thoughts, images, and sounds in the subject's brain. What this does is it sends complicated codes and electromagnetic pulse signals to activate evoked potentials inside the brain, and it generates sounds and visual images in the neural circuits. And with its speech, auditory, and visual communication systems, remote neural monitoring allows for audio-visual brain-to-brain link or a brain-to-computer link. It needs to decode the resonance frequency of each specific site to modulate the insertion of information in that specific location of the brain. Remote neural monitoring can detect hearing through electromagnetic microwaves, and it also features the transmission of specific commands into the subconscious and produces visual disturbances and hallucinations and injects words and numbers in the brain. And this is done through EM radiation waves. They're just distortion patterns. And it manipulates emotions and thoughts and reads thoughts remotely, causes pain to any nerve of the body, and allows for remote manipulation of behavior. Controls sleep patterns through which control over communication is made easy. And it can be used for crime investigation and security management. But we know that it's covertly used for many other things. So basically you need to detox your bodies, get all the heavy metals out, receive the gift of the Holy Spirit, put on the full armor of God, and stand as a warrior in these end times. I hope this information was helpful, and peace be with you all. Shabbat Shalom. May there be abundant peace from heaven and good life upon us. He who makes peace in his heights, may he in all his compassion make peace upon us. We give thanks unto the Father and praise his glorious name. Blessings and thanksgiving. His great and holy name has sustained us in life and preserved us and caused us to reach this day to pronounce a blessing and a thanksgiving. Amen.